Okay, okay. Hey, greetings, everybody. Nice to see so many of you showed up. I've been looking forward to talking to you all week. Excited about the show. Welcome to another Saturday Night Poets Table of Verse. And this is I think the umpteenth in the series. And I'm Mike Finley. Some of you may know me as Mike Finley. Some of you may know me as Big Vanilla, which is my rap name. Because I'm big and I'm pretty darn vanilla when you come right down to it. So we're going to spend the next hour together. I'm going to talk a bit. I have some stories and jokes and other utterances and pronouncements to lay upon you. And then if anyone has questions, we can open the floor for those and conversate about them with you. And we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. I'm open to discussing celebrity gossip about the great poets if you are inclined. So if you are following us online and you have questions that you'd like to ask, you may use the message board to type in your questions, and we'll get to them in the course of time. So in the meantime, we have the good services of host and executive producer, Ocean Sea Poet, my friend. She will be monitoring this room and keeping the unruly people within the lines and making sure it goes smoothly. So we've got some time. I'm so lucky to be doing this. Poets and whatever else it is I am, a writer. We crave stage time, and part of the problem is that we don't get very much. It's not easy to get. I was just talking about this with a writer a few minutes ago. You might get 5 minutes here. You might get 6, 7 minutes. It doesn't go much beyond that, in a group reading situation. So I have this wonderful luxury of having an hour to sit and talk and converse and spin crazy tales with you. So that's what I'm going to be doing. Let me start, for those of you that don't know the story of Big Vanilla, tell you a little bit about myself. I had a big red letter day the other day. It was the 4th of July, and that's my birthday. I was born the same date as our country. That's for you people in the United States. The Canadian and other nationalities don't celebrate that day. And I was 65 years old. Now, the significance of 65 is that I started writing poems and stories and premonitions at the age of 15. And my inspiration when I was 15 years old was that I was in detention hall. Back then, I was kind of a wise guy. I'm kind of smoothed out now, but back then I was spouting off a lot, and the various deans and principals of my high school didn't much care for it, and so I got a lot of late afternoon time. And at one point, it was like February, and I had a detention in every day remaining to the school year, going all the way to June. So I had a lot of time with a pencil and a notepad, and all the other people were just like shooting spitballs at each other. But I decided to make great art, and I started writing, and like every other young poet, it's kind of like junior high school boys. They always draw planes attacking ships in a war. I was doing the same equivalent with poetry. So I was spawned in detention hall, and I grew into what you see today. An all-purpose poet, writer, essayist, humorist, editor, whatever else you can tack onto that list. One of the questions that has been handed to me is, what kind of writer are you? You should know what kind of writer I am because of my great fame, but I'll explain. I'm I'm a writer who is easily bored. I don't like to write the same thing over and over. I don't like writing that's merely pretty. I write poetry, but I'm not probably the world's biggest fan of poetry. I find lots of bad habits in even some very good writers' work. When I enjoy something written, it's because there are things in it that are happening, and that's what I want. I want action. I want questions to be answered. I want jokes to be told, knees to be slapped. I want bombs to go off. I want brains to be reset, as we were just discussing a moment ago. That reset button, which takes you back to a state of factory specification, if you will. And so I like a poem in which something actually happens. The other question that came in to me a minute ago is how many books have you written? And this is almost a horrifying answer, but I have written 234 books. A lot of that statistic depends upon how you define a book. For years, I was a ghostwriter, and I wrote books for other people. And then I partnered with another writer, and some of these books, nonfiction books, were published in other languages. And each time this happened, I got a different Library of Congress number. So when I add all those numbers together, plus all the poetry and all the fiction and everything, it does come to 234. Some of these books don't exist in paper. They exist only as digital objects. And by the way, while we're talking digital objects, let me show you this. This is MikeFinleyWriter.com. This is my website, and I have just a Christmas tree loaded with literary goodies on that site that you can experience immediately and at no charge to yourself, and no salesman will call. So that's something that you might consider doing. So I've also been asked to say what book it is that I'll be reading from today. And I'm actually going to be reading from several sources. I've got this book here. It's called Victory Through Song. It's my current book that's been published. In it, there's a poem that I actually sing, much to the dismay of audiences from coast to coast. I'm traveling to Cleveland with my buddy Danny Klecko in a few weeks, and we're going to be celebrating a publication of a new book in Cleveland there called Newspaper Taxes Appear on the Shore. That's a quotation from a line from Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. And what else? Oh, I'll be reading from my Facebook notes page, which is where I tend to make first drafts and try them out on the unsuspecting public. So I'm going to be reading from all those sources. Mostly what I'm reading today will be a slight change for me. As I said earlier, I've kind of got a reputation as a wise guy, going back to detention hall. And I'm going to be suspending that wise guy reputation for much of this conversation, because I wanted to read some things that were very serious and sincere. And but before I do that, I want to read something that's pretty stupid. This poem is called Big Gulp. Big Gulp, you may know, is the large sodas that you can buy at 7-Eleven and other convenience stores, and that the recent mayor of New York banned because of their high corn solid content. It was giving all the kids in New York big tummies and bad toothaches. So what I want you to be on the lookout for in this poem, Big Gulp, is the fact that it begins kind of crazy, and then midway through it morphs into a love poem. And I think if you listen carefully, you'll hear that exact moment when it changes. Here we go. Big Gulp, a love poem. I read that a farmer in Lamar's, Iowa, fed his cattle expired ice cream from the Schwann's frozen food plant there. Great troughs of cookie dough vanilla, and chocolate mint swirl, disappearing into labyrinthine stomachs. Sometimes our politics are so retarded, we can't elect ourselves out of this predicament, no more than cows should make milk out of ice cream. The free market is a kind of confinement facility, and we are the herd shut up in the meat house, bawling our eyes out, groaning our displeasure, and by, we buy and we buy, no one expecting very much from us. Still we go on hoping, with a firm conviction that everything will turn out okay. Sucking down corn solids in the feedlots of America. We are not citizens, we are livestock, and democracy is such a crock. We get lost in the indifference, and I get spiked in the forehead by what we've become. Could a 7-Eleven have chosen a more degrading name than Big Gulp, one making a sound about as sentient as a toilet, a pull chain of calories, more sugar to the brain to fire our imaginations with useless information? But then there's you. If not for you, there but for you. The sole exception I have found being you, and the gravity you honor me with, the most wonderful gift, the seeing of me, the seeing that I'm not a callus of tissue, I am not a yard of tillage, I'm a man of thumping heart. I know we fight, but forget about that, because you are all I have to feel known, a person, not another card at the register, passing my barcodes down the conveyor belts. Here is one, Mukau, who knows the way back to the barn where I kneel at your manger, burping vanilla and stamping my hoofs to say, thank you. That was Big Gulp. Did you detect that moment when everything changed from a crazy poem to a love poem? Those are the artistic challenges that keep me going. I'm going to read now a poem about something very dear to my life, which is my dog. I have a sweet dog. She's sitting here on the floor being a good audience member, much like yourselves. And this poem is called Teaching My Dog to Read. Teaching my dog to read. In this poem, I teach my dog how to read. It has been a slow process. Her eyeing the page, then licking the page, then looking up at me. It does not help that she cannot say the words, she cannot say the sounds, not having the proper anatomy. Still, I'm patient that we will get to that in time. Because when you love someone and you know that they love you, you want them to read your books. Here's another poem which begins very portentously. You're on the brink of some major discovery, but then it's something else. It's called The Rapture, and it features my lovely wife, Rachel Frazen, who even as we speak is up in Alaska providing health care to the Inuits and Inupiats of Sitka, and is planning a major medical mission to the Tsum Valley of Nepal, providing earthquake and other relief. She's a really good person, is what I'm trying to tell you. Poem called The Rapture. Walking with Rachel, we detect a fragrance so sweet and so intense, like honey, lilac, and swirled violets. Rachel and I look at one another with a look of boundless optimism until we step into the clearing and see the turquoise plastic porta potty. Those two poems were silly, and I apologize for them. The next poem is not silly at all. The name is a little silly. The title of the poem is Big Ass Angels. But it's quite a serious poem. My spiritual training tells me that we're all equal, that we are all seeds from the same flower, and that logically, no one is really prettier or more beautiful than anyone else. That in our souls, we're all beautiful. And I know that much of the world tells us not to believe that. But it seems like such an important principle that I try to remember it anyway. Big ass angels. Beauty has always distracted us from the truth. Adam was deceived by Eve. Was she good, or did she just look that way? Man can never tell. Artists likewise get taken in. Given a choice between naked beauties to model the saints after and lumpy people living around town, you know which way they're going to go. Women of the world, take heart from the knowledge the masters were blind to. No one is prettier than anyone else. The eyes tell lies. What we call beauty is just paint and temptation. Help is coming, dear friends. A bell will sound, and all will know what we hoped was true, but could not quite believe. We are beautiful, lovely ones, so beautiful. And then we are beautiful beyond even that. Okay, I'm going to pause now and remind you that if you have questions that you'd like to ask me or to trigger a conversation or something like that, you're welcome to write them into using your keyboards, and I'll get to them in the fullness of time. I'm at an advantage over you, I must tell you, because you have to type into your keyboards, but I can answer by speaking into this microphone. That gives me an edge, and that's why I'm happy today. That was a serious poem I just read you called Big Ass Angels. Following in that trend of seriousness is a very short and rhyming poem with a simple title, Lesson. It's going to be over before you know it, so hang in there with me. Maybe I'll repeat a line like Robert Bly does. Lesson. There are people who have not been held in 20 years. Understandably, they are easily reduced to tears. If one were just to see them and press close, all the built-up aching inside explodes. Why can't the wounded have what the rest have? It's because heartache is unattractive. This next poem came to me in a dream. I dreamt that I walked down my sidewalk in front of my house, and there on the flagstones was a beating human heart. And it was a very disturbing dream. wrote this poem and titled it Beating Heart on Sidewalk. What do you do about it? It's not cool to kick it under the hedge. You could take it inside and try to raise it like your own, but it's hard to see where that will go. You could call the American Heart Association, but this isn't really what they do. The comps are no good. They'll just tag it and bag it. Over there, you can see the dog through the screen door, licking its lips. And this is the problem with every heart. We see it huffing, a little bit scuffed from passing traffic. So brave, so hopeful, so eager to get back to business. We know it's there, but we don't know what to do. One question has come in. Emily in Lilydale asks, Mike, you're such a wonderful poet, but can you tell us, is there a poet that you especially admire? And, that's a wonderful question. There are many poets that I admire and that I've learned from. I was talking about the 1960s and 70s. During that time, without having any credentials or special education or anything like that, I was very fortunate to come to the attention of three iconic American writers. And they were all great poets, and they were all related to one another in the kind of writing they did. The first was James Wright, who, much to my amazement, I found out was a familiar to my family. My stepfather's stepmother, her sister, my stepfather's stepmother's sister, was actually a legal guardian for James Wright when he was 17, which was about the age that I was when I found this out. And James Wright, if you don't know him, he writes this incredibly sweet, sensitive, powerful poetry in the 1970s. Almost everybody's imitated it since, so it doesn't seem as maybe as powerful today as it was at that time. But I went and visited him, and he was kind to me, and that was wonderful. The next one is William Stafford, the Oregon poet. When I went to college, I got to interview him on the college's closed circuit television network station, and we hit it off. And I ran into him years later, and he even remembered, this freshman from college that asked him if he enjoyed writing, and he did. He loved it. He just loved to write. It was the great pleasure of his life. And finally, and the one I'm going to put on top of all this, is Minnesota's own Robert Bly. During the 70s, I and many other young writers followed him around, and he was just the most amazing teacher and mentor. Just listening to him read, you could learn so many good things. His tone, when he read, it wasn't poetic, it was reckless, and it was impeccable, and he would stress different words than you might stress if you were like an artist on stage. He was brilliant, and he was brutally honest, and he could really give you the red ass with his comments. He was a very good critic. He knew how to call a spade a spade. He avoided what I call poemy or show-off language. His verse was smart, and it was tied into the great masters of history like William Butler Yeats, and the Chinese poets, but he was very easy to get. He was not really all that literary. He was really about people and about consciousness. And living in Minnesota, I was living in Minnesota, I saw him as our regional wizard and living in our midst. And one thing I have learned in my long life is that wizards don't come along very often. So that's my statement about my favorite poets. Let's move forward. I have another poem. This poem I wrote in memory of my daughter, who took her life in 2009, Danielle Finley. She had problems loving herself. And, you know, we live in a time when so many young people are crashing and burning. And somehow, despite their loving natures and their joy in participating in the world, they're not making it. We're losing them, and there's an epidemic of suicide and comparable epidemics of drug abuse, alcoholism, anxiety disorders, addictions, up and down, and I sometimes think that this generation is the canary in the coal mine for what awaits us down the road. This poem is called "There is a Kingdom." There is a kingdom of people who don't like who they are, though the birds sing there with every kind of flower. No one knows how they got this way. Some think they live under a witch's curse. Some say they drank from a poisoned well. Some say the people are sinners from another life, and this sad life is their punishment. Some even say these people are the scapegoats from every other kingdom where the people don't care who suffers for them, and the music and the dancing in those lands go on. Three-line poem. Gust. The weather is changing. The coat hangers jangle softly in the dark. I have another in this series of melancholy poems. It's called Beautiful Creatures. If any of you are Bruce Cockburn fans, he's a singer-songwriter. He has a song called Beautiful Creatures. And the name of this poem is Beautiful Creatures by Bruce Cockburn. And it is about the current loss we are experiencing of as many as 20,000 different species of animal. And it's a sadden, I must tell you. Beautiful Creatures by Bruce Cockburn. Cockburn starts to intone the phrase, beautiful creatures, and his voice begins to rise until the phrase is like a chimney, sending sparks high up into the sky. And what Cockburn is saying, the beautiful creatures are going away. His voice is like a mournful klaxon, a shooting flame of sadness for the species that are going extinct in our time. The beautiful creatures are going away. Their beautiful eyes, their beautiful cries, the tree frog, antelope, the beautiful butterflies, the clarity of their hunger, the fierceness of their love. And we will see them go and be unable to stop them because other things mattered more. Going away to a different place, by leg, by wing, on their beautiful bellies, they are taking their beauty away from us. They are never coming back. And when I read this at a reading, I stop and I go, oh. One of the nice things about this setup, this webcast, when I go to a bar or a salon or a poetry reading, you have to shout. You have to shout to have the words get to the back of the room. But that doesn't happen here. It has, I think this is what Frank Sinatra learned, which is that you have a microphone, you can speak softly, and the message carries. And so there's a very substantially higher degree of intimacy possible in electronic communications. Kind of a paradox, wouldn't you say? This poem is called Don't Be Like the Moon. Don't be like the moon, your face all scars, dismayed by your bombardment. Because if that is your choice, to be just like the moon, the night is what you will be relegated to. A lantern hanging in the darkness. Do not be bewildered like the moon. Do not gaze open-mouthed into space. Do not dwell on memories gone bad. Rather, be like the earth you were plucked out of, the one that lives, that heaves and sighs. Deny your losses. Shed your skin. Pack away the dead so they cannot be seen. Make roses grow between the rows. Be like the blooming earth and forget. Some time ago, Danny Klecko and I sponsored a pair of readings. This was this spring, celebrating the publication of a collected poems by the Polish poet Wisława Szymborska. She's a Nobel Prize winner. She passed away some years ago, but she inspired people around the world by writing in a sentence that wasn't sentimental. It was very thoughtful. She would think problems through in her poems. And there was, she had a sly way of indicting people who didn't give a crap about the world. But she was also companionable to everyone who suffered, everyone who was victimized by the terrible century that she lived in. This is actually a poem about a freeway experience that I had. And the title is, You Should Have Seen Me, Wisława Szymborska. And it's about the reading that I just described to you. This was in Red Wing, Minnesota. You should have seen me, Wisława Szymborska. The reading went okay, but in the last 3 lines, I lost a word. I was reciting from memory, and suddenly I hit a wall. It was okay. I wasn't too embarrassed. I just pulled out your poem and read it. Nobody said anything. I'm old. My brain is old. These things will happen. But oh, my darling, you should have seen me that morning before the reading, driving down 35E and nailing those lines at the wheel and punching the air with my finger, voice rising and soaring. Then a car drew close in the opposite lane, and a woman your age glanced over at me, waving my fists and shouting in the cab. I maybe looked a little like a maniac, but not a dangerous one. And you, my darling, smiled lovingly, one stranger to another. She was a sweetheart. You should see the pictures that I made of her. You looked at her and you wanted to know her. You could tell she was a classy, classy lady. If only women ran centuries instead of my kind, my team. I'm still open for any questions you may want to ask, maybe provoke me into a conversation. I have a few more poems I can read to you until those questions come in, and then we'll call it a day. This poem is called Opportunity. It's about a caterpillar. Logically, the caterpillar would chew the leaf forever. But then the tumbler clicks inside, and the worm begins to spin his tomb. How afraid we would be to seal ourselves in like that until all light is gone and there is no leaf to eat, and all movement ceases, and we tremble in the dark. This poem's title is longer than the poem itself. The title, Contemplating the Losses One Has Personally Suffered, along with the misery of the entire world through all time. A happy ending was out of the question. A moment to sing, and then comes the rolled up newspaper. Oh, how we howl when the pie has been eaten. I think it's time we did something a little upbeat. And I have a poem whose title is Spring Green. And it's a poem about the color of green that you see in spring. Spring green is not like regular green. It seems shot through with shafts of gold that waver in the still, angular sunlight. It is not sturdy or worried about rain. It's not worried about anything. The grass is like a school of fish that shifts with every shifting breeze. It is profligate and optimistic. Go ahead and step on our bodies, they say. You cannot crush us all. The ghosts of winter have been vacuumed away, and little heads now lift their heads and sing. I have a few more to share with you. This recent poem is called Why Horses Run Back into Burning Barns. This doesn't happen every time a barn burns, but every now and then, observers report that horses escape from the burning barn and then they run back into it. So this poem attempts to analyze what would make a horse do that. Why horses run back into burning barns. It's an instinct to seek out the familiar when conditions take a turn for the worst. The abused wife, the addict, the man tearing stubs in half at the track. It's an investment we made that we can't walk away from. Even when the house we bought with blood is sinking into the blue of the bay. My friend Danny Klecko asked me to read this poem. I need to explain it. The title is My Huckleberry Friend. If you like pop music from the 1960s, you'll know that the phrase My Huckleberry Friend was a line from Henry Mancini's, or maybe it was Johnny Mercer's Moon River. It was Johnny Mercer. My Huckleberry Friend. But it also refers to Huckleberry Finn. Huckleberry Finn was the kid who climbed onto a raft with his slave friend Jim. And this was during antebellum the South, before the war broke out. And they took this raft and they spun all the way down to New Orleans into all sorts of pain, enslavement, and difficulty. And I wrote this poem in the wake of my daughter's death, as I was coming to grips with a God that really can't always be counted on. And I ended up firing that God and hiring a different God, a God that doesn't promise to save you every time you're in trouble, or he doesn't save you. My Huckleberry Friend, my Huckleberry Friend. I think this is my new religion. Adrift down the river with a friend who cannot save us, who cannot stop the war, who cannot set us free. All we have is one another. Heads in our hands, staring up at the stars. Again, this is my book, Victory Through Song. If you want to buy it, probably the best place to look for it is Subtext Bookstore, downtown St. Paul. I think that's 5th and, well, it's on 5th Avenue, downtown St. Paul. And these two poems are taken from that. The first one is titled, The Way to Do, The Way to Do. Forget about all the F-ups you've made. Thinking about them only F's you up some more. Stop worrying what the future has in store. Anxieties leave marks in your underpants. The best policy I have found is to plant yourself on your back stoop and watch the robins hop about without using their knees. Think about how they do that, or don't. Eat when you feel the need to eat. When it's time to go down, give yourself permission to draw the eyelids closed. But stay on the lookout, because you never know, you know? I hadn't planned to do this, but this is my epic musical poem from Victory Through Song, called Victory Through Song. And it's the true story of Vasily Zaitsev, a Red Army artilleryman who suffered battle fatigue in Afghanistan in the 1980s. The trauma of seeing his friends immolated by a gasoline bomb caused him to sing everything he said, and a little out of tune, as I will do as well. Some comrades feared he would give away their position with his incessant singing, and they took him out, shooting him as he slept. But Vasily Zaitsev did not die. He lives today, 40 years later, as a mechanic in Chechnya. From now on, I will enter every room singing, just like in an American musical, singing morning, noon, and night. I will be singing to my cereal. I will sing to the dog who will tilt her head in confusion, and I will laugh and kiss her on the head. And everything will change. You will smile when you see me. You will say, there's a man who's not paying attention to reality. Because he always greets us singing. He is restoring his people with color and laughter, they will say. And they will lock hands across the city, and traffic will come to a stop, and the people roll down their windows and start singing. Money will stop being everything, one beautiful song after another, and children will thank their parents for every act of love, and wives and husbands will sing to one another, and the government will get suspicious as the economy starts to tank, because even the hedge managers are looking out their windows now, and they can't stop singing. And plans will be drawn up, and I will stand in the courtyard, arms outstretched and beaming with love. A shot will ring out, and down I will go, and my heart will stop beating, but only for a moment, and I will lie on my back, gazing up at the clouds. And remarkably, And inexplicably, I will still be singing to my assassins. How sad it must make you to do this violent deed, but to have so little effect. How proud you must be with your snipers' rifles. How brave you all are with your guns. How amazing you must be, you gangsters, to shoot a man for singing and to fail. Which brings us round to our conclusion. I remind you again, you can go to MikeFinleyWriter.com and find all sorts of free things to download. I've written all these books, not making any money on it. What did I calculate once? 50 years of work, right? I doubt that I've made $2,000 in all that time on all the fees and payments and everything. But still, I venture on. And I have the answer to that riddle. Why do you do it, Mike? What the heck's going on in you? Why is this important to you? I will tell you in this concluding poem, also published in Victory Through Song, and it asks this question: why poetry? Why poetry? Other kinds of writing, people are always in a hurry to get it done. Make the deadline, ring the bell. Poetry, that never happens. Zero demand, less reward. This thing was made for the likes of me. So that's all I've got for you today. It's been a delight to sit with you. It's been kind of a quiet hour. And and I must tell you, it's a very strange sensation, because in the webcast, as I'm speaking to you, I'm nevertheless looking at me. So it's like talking into the mirror, but knowing that other people are watching me. It's like all these people are crowded into the bathroom with me. And I don't know how I feel about that. But anyway, it's been great fun. I enjoyed doing this. I want to thank the Ocean Sea Poet who has commandeered this whole operation. Her creativity and I think genius in concocting this program, which it took me a long time to understand. I'm grateful to her for that. And it has been a delight talking to you for this hour. And if you are still interested in asking more questions, I think she's provided my email address to you. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. I hope if you see me on the street, you'll stop and say, "Hey, Mike, how are you doing?" Because for a poet, that's about it. Thanks very much. Have a great day. Oh, and I forgot. There's going to be a showcase at 7 o'clock this very evening, and perhaps we'll get that information to you. Thank you very much.